I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Vicki Wynn in for Savannah. We begin this morning with a new twist in the ongoing standoff between the United States and Iran over a peace deal to end the conflict. Iran says it is reviewing the latest peace proposal from the U.S. after President Trump said an agreement was, quote, very possible. Despite the renewed optimism, a new flare-up in the critical Strait of Hormuz is highlighting the uncertainty and fragility of the situation.
U.S. Central Command said one of its fighter jets fired on an Iranian-flagged oil tanker on Wednesday after it tried to bypass the U.S. blockade of Iranian ports. NBC News is also learning more about that abrupt U-turn in President Trump's plan to escort stranded tankers in the Strait. Two U.S. officials say the reversal came after backlash from a key ally. Saudi Arabia suspended the U.S. military's ability to use its military bases and airspace to carry out the operation. NBC News Washington correspondent Alice Barr joins us with the very latest. Alice, good morning.
Good morning, Joe and Vicki. Yeah, we are hearing a lot of optimism that a deal could be close. And President Trump posted that an agreement means Operation Epic Fury would be over and the Strait of Hormuz would be open. But he said if Iran does not agree, the bombing will start at a much higher level than before.
A mixed picture in the Middle East as a new confrontation clashes with rising hopes for a deal with Iran. U.S. Central Command says an American fighter jet fired on and disabled an Iranian oil tanker after it ignored warnings and tried to bypass the U.S. blockade of Iranian ports.
It's like a wall of steel. Nobody goes through.
That as stocks rallied over reports in the Wall Street Journal about a one-page, 14-point U.S. proposal to end the war, citing people familiar. Iranian media quoted a foreign ministry spokesperson saying a U.S. proposal is under review.
We've had very good talks over the last 24 hours, and it's very possible that we'll make a deal.
New NBC News reporting reveals President Trump paused his Project Freedom effort to guide ships through the Strait of Hormuz after pushback from a key U.S. ally. Two U.S. officials say Saudi Arabia suspended the U.S. military's ability to use its bases and airspace over frustrations they were caught off guard. All of that as Secretary of State Marco Rubio arrived in Rome today, meeting with Pope Leo amid tensions over President Trump's sharp criticism of the first American pontiff who has spoken out against the war.
Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon, and he seemed to be saying that they can.
The Pope rejects that, saying the Catholic Church has always opposed nuclear weapons.
I always believe that it's much better to enter into dialogue than to look for arms.
Secretary Rubio denied his visit is meant to smooth relations with the Vatican.
And while oil prices dropped on hopes of a peace deal, industry figures tell NBC News it could still take a while to get energy shipping back up to speed through the Strait of Hormuz, with ship operators likely to remain cautious until they see a more stable, predictable and sustained situation. Vicki and Joe.
You know, Alice, this is not the first time the two sides have said they've been close to a deal. Is there any reason to think this could be different?
It's a real question. Pakistani mediators have been pointing to signs of progress, and they're probably best positioned to know, going back and forth between the U.S. and Iran. And then you played off the top there a clip of our NBC News colleague pressing President Trump about this yesterday, asking why things would be different, given that just a few days ago, the Iranians were firing on American ships. The president said a few days is a long time in a war, and that this is a quickly moving situation. He thinks talks are going well. And we could be close this time, guys.
All right. Alice Barr, thank you.
As we have just mentioned, Secretary of State Marco Rubio met with Pope Leo earlier this morning at the Vatican. This meeting comes a day before the pontiff marks 1 year as the leader of the Catholic Church. This was their first meeting since the Pope's inaugural Mass last year. It comes as President Trump continues to criticize the Pope over his views about the war in Iran. NBC News international correspondent Claudio Lavanga joins us now from Rome with the very latest. Claudio, it's great to see you. So earlier this week, Secretary Rubio said that he expected a, quote, frank meeting with Pope Leo. President Trump in recent weeks, as we know, has called out the Pope. That has drawn a lot of bipartisan backlash, including some of those posts that the president shared of himself kind of as a holy leader. So the president is arguing the Pope was, quote, endangering a lot of Catholics when it came to Iran. What do we know at this point, Claudio, about today's meeting, and who else was there?
Hey, Vicky. Well, usually when the Pope receives a dignitary in private audience like it happened this morning, the Vatican usually issues a very short statement in which it lists the number of subjects that were discussed. As for now, the meeting ended about half an hour ago, and for now we haven't received that statement yet. But there is no doubt that this meeting comes at a time when diplomatic relations between the Vatican and the U.S. are at a historic low, following that criticism that you mentioned by President Trump and the continuous accusations by President Trump that Pope Leo, he says, is okay with Iran having a nuclear weapon, something that Pope Leo has never said. As you heard earlier, he said that the Church has spoken out against nuclear weapons always, forever, basically. And he also said that if somebody wants to criticize him for proclaiming the gospel, at least he should do that by speaking the truth. Just to tell you how confusing things are here at the Vatican, and these messages are coming here. The Secretary of State of the Vatican, Pietro Parolin, also said, well, I find it a bit strange that he keeps saying that when it's just not true. So this meeting early this morning, even though it was presented as a meeting that was organized before Trump's comments on Monday, and also that it was about religious freedom around the world and humanitarian aid in Cuba, this is how it was presented by the Secretary of State. Well, there's no doubt that part of it, at least, will have been to kind of clarify the position by President Trump. Why does he continue to say that? And also to mend relations between the U.S. and the Vatican. Vicky?
Yes. Okay. Well, Claudio, we know that Rubio is set to head to Rome on Friday for a meeting with the Italian Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, who has also defended the Pope. How is the relationship between the Italian leader and the Trump administration?
Well, just until literally a few weeks ago, Giorgia Meloni and Italy were seen as one of the, if not the strongest ally of the Trump administration here in Europe. Giorgia Meloni, the Prime Minister, defended him until recently, even when other European leaders were criticizing him. But the Trump's criticism, long rant against the Pope at the beginning of April, was one step too far. And that's when Giorgia Meloni turned and she criticized Trump and defended the Pope. Then what happened is that Italy also denied the use of air bases here, the U.S. air bases here in Italy, for U.S. bombers taking part in the war with Iran. So it declined the proposal to be involved in that war. And after that, President Trump said he was very disappointed with Giorgia Meloni. He was shocked. She's not the same person anymore. And even threatened recently that he will pull out soldiers from U.S. bases here in Italy, as he did with the 5,000 soldiers from Germany. So tomorrow morning, on Friday morning, the Secretary Rubio will meet with the foreign minister here and Giorgia Meloni, and that will be another attempt to mend relations, this time with the Italian government. Vicky.
Claudio, out of politics to the arts now. The Vatican has announced it will release a documentary about the first years of Pope Leo in Italy back in the early 1980s. During those times, of course, he was known as Robert Prevost. What more can you tell us about this new doc and what we can expect?
Yeah, they announced that this documentary will come out tomorrow, just to coincide, of course, with the first anniversary of his election. And I've seen a trailer, and a part of that, the most interesting part, for instance, is that black and white picture of a very young Robert Prevost in 1983 taking part in a peace protest here in Italy. Now, is that a coincidence, or perhaps is that another way for the Vatican to say, well, the Pope has been against war for a long time, even as a young priest, Vicky?
Claudio Lavanga, live this morning for us. Thank you so much, Claudio.
The Epstein files are back in the spotlight after a federal judge released a suicide note purportedly written by the late convicted sex offender. The handwritten letter has not been authenticated. It dates back to what was believed to be Epstein's unsuccessful suicide attempt in July of 2019, less than 2 weeks before he died. It reads in part, "They investigated me for a month, found nothing." The writing is difficult to read, but appears to say, so 16-year-old charges resubmitted. It concludes with this: "It is a treat to be able to choose one's time to say goodbye. What you want me to do? Bust out crying? No fun. Not worth it." According to the New York Times, Epstein's then cellmate, former New York City police officer Nicholas Tartagliani, has said he was the one who discovered the note. Now, Epstein was found dead by suicide in his jail cell that August. Federal investigators later blamed his death on a cascade of misconduct, negligence, and errors by staff at New York's Metropolitan Corrections Center. Let's bring in NBC News senior national politics reporter Jonathan Allen. John, good morning. This was not part of that trove of millions of files released by the Justice Department over the past year. So why is it being made public now, and just how does it fit into what we do know about Epstein's death?
Good morning, Joe. It's nice to see Vicky so early in the morning, an unusual treat. What we know about this note is that it was released because a federal judge said that it had to be released. The New York Times had sued to get it released. And in terms of what it says about, what we know about the Epstein case, the official conclusion was that he committed suicide. This note is actually believed to be related to an earlier failed attempt by Epstein to commit suicide, but certainly would point in the direction of somebody who was suicidal at the time, if in fact it is authentic, and of course has not been authenticated yet. But I think that's, from a contextual purpose, there have been a lot of conspiracy theories about what happened around Jeffrey Epstein's death, and this would seem to suggest, if it's real, that he was in the frame of mind to kill himself.
And John, this note coming out on the same day a top Trump cabinet member was questioned about his ties to Epstein. That's Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. He voluntarily appeared for a closed-door interview with the House Oversight Committee. That committee is reviewing the federal government's handling of the Epstein investigation. So, John, I know the transcript from this interview has not been released yet, but just how are lawmakers reacting to what they heard?
This is going to surprise you, Joe. They are reacting in exact opposite fashion to each other and in completely partisan terms. But Lutnick, of course, the sitting Commerce Secretary for President Trump, had a long relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Some of the things that they talked about among their households were very sort of day-to-day, like, who can recommend a painter, and then there were the times where they were more personal, like the lunch visit that Lutnick apparently went on to Epstein's private island. But let's hear the lawmakers talk about what they think they heard.
I feel like that Lutnick's been very transparent. He came in voluntarily. I said before this thing started, the only thing that I had seen that Lutnick did wrong wasn't 100% truthful on the brief visit to the island with his family. He corrected that.
Of all of the depositions that we have done so far, I find Howard Lutnick to be the least credible.
Republicans defending the Trump administration cabinet member, Democrats attacking him. No surprise there, Joe.
And while we're talking about politics, John, before I let you go, let's talk about the redistricting battle that's sweeping just states all across the country. We're learning the FBI raided the office of a prominent Virginia state lawmaker yesterday, L. Louise Lucas. She was heavily involved in that state's effort to redraw its congressional maps, helping Democrats. What do we know about this investigation, John?
Yeah, NBC sources say that this is one that actually dates back to the Biden administration in terms of investigating possible corruption by the state lawmaker in question. We know that there was an FBI raid yesterday, not only on her office, but also on an associated business, a marijuana business. And so what's been said is that by the administration is that it's not focused on drugs, but rather on other topics. And in addition to that, this cannabis store was raided.
All right, John Allen, thank you so much. And because we did mention suicide, a reminder, if you or someone you know is thinking about suicide, struggling with substance use, or experiencing a mental health crisis or emotional distress, you can contact the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. You can call or text 988 or visit 988lifeline.org to speak with trained crisis counselors.
Former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani is out of the ICU this morning as he continues to recover from pneumonia. His spokesman says the 81-year-old will remain in the hospital. At one point, Giuliani was in critical but stable condition. He had previously been diagnosed with restrictive airway disease in the wake of the September 11th attacks. A longtime friend and former lawyer of President Trump, Giuliani represented the president in lawsuits attempting to overturn the 2020 election. He was pardoned by President Trump last year.
In international news, medical crews are evacuating some of the passengers aboard the cruise ship hit by that deadly hantavirus outbreak. These evacuations come after 3 people died and several more were sickened by the rare virus.
Passengers who were showing possible symptoms were flown by medical planes to a hospital in the Netherlands. You can see one of the patients fully covered and on a stretcher alongside medical officials wearing hazmat suits.
For more, let's bring in NBC News international correspondent Raf Sanchez. Raf, good morning. So what do we know about the people who were evacuated, and are there any more suspected cases on board?
Joe, Vicky, good morning. Yeah, so 3 people evacuated yesterday, 1 British, 1 Dutch, 1 German. Dutch authorities are saying 2 of them are showing symptoms of hantavirus. The other one was in very close contact with one of the 3 passengers who died. So they were taken off of that ship yesterday onto the small island of Cape Verde, and from there they were flown by those specialist air ambulances on to the Netherlands, where their treatment is underway. Our partners at Sky News caught up with the British citizen who was flown out. He's a former police officer who was acting as an expedition guide for passengers on that ship. He says that he is feeling in okay shape, but he is in hospital and may be potentially for the foreseeable future in the Netherlands. Guys.
Rav, this morning we're also learning that about 40 passengers had disembarked at the island of St. Helena. What do we know about how they're doing and where they're headed next?
Yeah, Vicky, so this is a critical part of the story. One line of containing the virus is making sure that those roughly 150 people who are still on the ship safely get to land. But another big part of it is tracking the dozens of passengers who got off the ship a couple of weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, on April 24th. Those passengers are now scattered across the world. 6 Americans are among them. We know that authorities in several states in the U.S. are now monitoring Americans who are on board that ship who came home. And there is a massive contact tracing effort underway in multiple countries across the world to make sure that authorities know who those roughly 30, 40 passengers have been in contact with, and making sure that none of them are showing symptoms. Guys.
So, Ralph, the ship now heading to the Canary Islands. Do we know what happens to the people still on board, trapped on the ship, once they get there?
Yeah, so we just got an updated timeline from the Spanish Interior Ministry, Joe. They are saying they expect the ship to reach the Canary Islands on Sunday. There will then be some initial preparations, initial screening, and if all goes well, they believe that the first passengers will be evacuated on Monday. On the islands, there's, as you can imagine, an enormous effort to make sure that nobody spreads the virus from the ship to the population of the island. There will be screening there, quarantine if necessary, and from there, those passengers will be sent back home. Guys.
Raf, there has been a new case that was reported in Switzerland, a passenger who disembarked there. What have we learned about that person?
Yeah, so that person is now being treated in Switzerland, and importantly, that is a confirmed case of hantavirus. The tests have been run. The doctors are 100% sure that that is what they are dealing with. There is another confirmed case in South Africa right now, and worryingly, guys, there is a Dutch flight attendant who is in hospital in the Netherlands showing possible symptoms, and that is somebody who, according to Dutch media, was on the same plane as a cruise ship passenger who went on to die later. Guys.
All right, Raph, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Closer to home, new video out of Texas shows the moment a father fought off a would-be carjacker, shooting and killing the man who tried to take his car with his family inside. NBC News correspondent Ryan Chandler has more on the dramatic confrontation caught on tape.
New video shows the moment a father opens fire in an act police are calling self-defense.
Get the kids out of the way!
Watch as this man approaches a parked car and forces his way into the vehicle on Sunday. The driver tries to pull him away as a child runs out, fighting as the family scrambles for safety. Police say the driver, 2 women, and several children, even a baby, were in the car.
I was able to help get them inside so they weren't in the line of fire.
Police tell us the suspect, 30-year-old Jose Ramirez, crashed into 2 cars at this gas station and then tried to force his way into at least 4 others. He then crossed the street into this parking lot where he targeted that car with the family inside. Tatiana Starks watched from her store just feet away, jumping into action to help the kids.
Hats off goes to Dad because Dad was able to stand his ground and protect his family.
The father fires 10 shots, killing the attacker.
We are looking at this as a self-defense case.
Our thanks to Ryan Chandler for that report. Officials say as of now, no charges have been filed against the father as the investigation continues.
Scary situation. All right. Media pioneer Ted Turner has died. The founder of CNN passed away Wednesday at the age of 87. Turner transformed television in 1980. He launched the world's first 24-hour news network, changing how people around the world consumed breaking news. He later built a media empire with TBS, TNT, and Turner Classic Movies, while also becoming known for his philanthropy and conservation work. Turner died peacefully at his home in Florida, surrounded by family.
Freeze alerts still in effect for the Rockies, with those below average temps stretching across much of the country. We've got all the details with your morning News Now weather.
Meteorologist Angie Lastman joins us now. Hey, Angie, good morning.
Hi, guys. Good morning to you. We indeed have those freeze alerts up for 27 million people right now across parts of the Great Lakes, as well as across parts of the Rockies and the Plains. This coming after that really impressive snowfall for folks across the Rockies over the past couple of days. The snow has, of course, tapered off, but we're still left with these really chilly conditions in places like Denver, just 39 for your temperature right now. We've got 35 in Minneapolis, mid-30s in Green Bay as well, even some 20s out there for parts of northern Illinois. We've got 38 degrees in Cincinnati. As we get into the afternoon hours, you can see we're setting up for kind of a cool day, even as we get into the warmest part of the day. Temperatures running well below normal, some spots 10 to 15 degrees below where they should be. As we get into the afternoon hours in Indianapolis, expect just 62 degrees. We've got some mid-60s for Springfield. Still going to make it into the 70s in places like Austin and Shreveport, but again, running below normal for where we should be as we roll through early May. It'll be cooler in the east tomorrow. You can see some 50s out there for Buffalo, 60s in Boston, and a couple of spots hitting the 70s from Richmond to Lexington. By the time we get into next week, we're actually going to start to kind of moderate out to those typical temperatures that we expect for this time of year. So mid-60s on Saturday in New York City, but we end up into those mid-70s by Sunday, 80s on tap on Sunday in Richmond. We've got some milder conditions across places like Detroit as well, with those kind of very spring-like conditions settling in for Saturday there. Meanwhile, talk about spring-like conditions. We've got still a tornado watch across parts of the south. This has been kind of a bumpy go with this system as it works to the east, and it's still left us with not just the severe threat, but also those flood alerts. We've got 8 million people across Alabama and Georgia, including Montgomery and Atlanta, included in those as this kind of batch of rain works to the east. The good news is this front is going to kind of slide off the coast here as the day goes on, but we've still got some really kind of strong storms that we could see fire up along the Gulf Coast this afternoon, guys, and more of those showers and thunderstorms across parts of the mid-Atlantic. And then we'll finally kind of see a little bit of a break, at least from that system, as we get into tomorrow.
At least from that system.
At least from that system.
Busy time.
Hedging my bets.
You had me at 70s in the Northeast. I was really happy about that.
Make your outdoor plans.
Yeah. Thank you, Angie.
Just days after that dramatic comeback win at the Kentucky Derby, we're learning Golden Tempo will not be going for the Triple Crown. Trainer Cherie DeVaux announced yesterday Golden Tempo is going to skip the Preakness Stakes, which is, of course, the second leg of the Triple Crown. DeVaux says the horse's health, happiness, and long-term future will remain the top priority, but DeVaux says there is a chance we'll get to see Mr. Tempo run in the Belmont Stakes in June. This marks the third time in the last 5 years that the Derby winner has skipped the Preakness. That race coming up on May 16th.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.